value chain as the protests and looting have continued over the past week. We're going to cross to Nkuli Bogopa. She's going to try to quantify this a little bit further. Nkuli, a very good evening and thank you for joining us. I think with concerns about protests which have turned violent, obviously causing severe damage to property and the costs now having to be counted. How exactly have you been impacted?
Thank you for having me and good evening to your listeners. It's been a very, very difficult time for the industry. As an industry player, we manage properties for at least 17 listed funds. And what we have seen in terms of the ravaging effects of the riots across the two provinces has been quite dire. Over 200 malls have been affected. Jobs have definitely been affected. The various value chain of service providers across the sector, whether it's soft services or technical services, have definitely been affected. Billions of rands worth of property and real estate assets and investments have been lost in just over the past number of weeks, and it has been devastating to the sector, to say the least.
Nkuli, when we look at consumer safety and how it's become, of paramount importance, how exactly is this being prioritized? How do we also quantify the impact of the additional costs that COVID-19 has also presented and exacerbated further?
We obviously have had a sector that was ailing as a result of COVID and all of its lockdown regulations following the hard shutdown that we had of the industry last year when COVID started. What we have seen now is destruction that we may possibly not even be able to recover from for at least the next 2 years. And we don't want to give shattering statistics here, but some of the real estate that we are seeing and the amount of damage that we are seeing could take up to 3 to 6 months to rebuild, and in some cases we've heard today about 2 years. So to not be able to stock up those retailers even when they come up and running because the distribution centers have also been destroyed is also ravaging the sector, and I think it will really affect how quickly we can rebuild. And all our efforts now, following the discussions that have been held with the various social partners, which is positive. I think that the speed with which the social partners have come together to say, how do we quickly rebuild and move forward, has really helped. And I think that the focus on making sure that we stabilize, because if we don't stabilize, we don't know and cannot quantify exactly how much damage we are talking about. So the damage can only really be quantified properly at the end of all of these damages that are currently going on in the country right now.
I mean, assessing these damages is obviously an ongoing process that you as an industry will have to quantify going forward. But when we look at the issue of consumer safety also being of paramount importance, particularly as the looting and protesting seems to not have stopped just yet, what measures have been put in place to ensure consumer protection at this time?
The private security companies are working very hard with other social partners. I think the taxi industry has come to the fore in a very meaningful way, although we do warn against, relying on an industry such as the taxi industry to be the ones at the forefront. The SAPS have been quite limited in terms of their numbers and what they can do in terms of capacity. SANDF has been brought out to the streets, but I must add that across the various properties that we are looking after, it has been with very little visibility that the SANDF has been seen on the ground. And I think that is where we need to do a little bit better in terms of securing the assets that are still safe, at this point in time, because we depend on it as consumers for the sake of food security and all the other resources that we are going to need, especially in light of a health pandemic that we are in. I think that the infrastructure damage has to be prioritized by government in terms of accessibility to the various assets that we need to get to in order to get help to the people, whether in responding to the health pandemic or just responding to food security that is starting to become a problem. Another problem that
CEO of Broad Properties, Nkuli Bogopa, just joining us to chat about the consumer safety measures and also the impact that the protests and looting have had on the industry at large. I think from Nkuli Bogopa, let's cross to our reporter, J.D. Pulser. She is also stating